Chapter 65. Since the carriage had been completely destroyed, Princess Ling Meng naturally could not be bothered to talk about it. She leapt onto a horse brought over by her bodyguard and slowly returned home. However, her mood was exceptionally heavy. Murong Qianjun hastily commanded the imperial guards to catch up with Princess Ling Meng, protecting her in the middle. Riding on his horse, he turned his head to look back and thought to himself, that Jun Moxie fellow looks like he is seriously injured. I wonder if he will die. If he's dead, that would be for the best. I want to beat him up whenever I see him. He's asking for a beating. He actually wants to woo Princess Raimu with that kind of conduct. He really doesn't know his own worth. He snorted as he looked at Princess Ling Meng's graceful figure from atop his horse. He could not help but be dazzled by her beauty. His mind was captivated by her, and his mind was in a state of limitless ecstasy. For a moment, he had completely forgotten to send someone to inform the Jun family. I say, old man, you've been following me like a ghost for 3 days. Don't tell me you've taken a fancy to me because I'm handsome. Jun Xia was held in the bosom of the old man as though he was a baby. This old man was like a dried-up chicken, his entire body seemingly devoid of flesh. Jun Xia felt an indescribable discomfort throughout his body, as though he was lying on a cobblestone. Knowing that this old man would definitely not harm him, there was no need for him to be courteous and ridiculed him. Pfft! Do you think I want to follow a prodigal like you? You've been running around all day. I don't know what kind of dirty tricks you've used to escape from my sight. What do you think? Is this retribution? If it wasn't for your grandfather spending a lot of money. Huh? How did you know I've been following you for 3 days? The old man's face was full of resentment. He felt that following this debauchee was degrading him. He was about to complain when he suddenly realized something was wrong. This was no small matter. How did this useless brat know that I've been following him for 3 days? Could it be that my invisible tracking skills have deteriorated to this extent? In his shock, he immediately stopped in his tracks. He did not even mind Jun Xia's disrespectful way of addressing him as an old man. Idiot! Why are you asking such a simple question? Of course, someone told me. Jun Xia thought for a moment and casually said. Although this old man's tracking method was not as good as Jun Xia's, but even in his previous life it was still first-rate. Based on the original Jun Moxie's skills, even if he trained for another 100 or 80 years he would not be able to detect it, not to mention escaping from this old man's sight. You're the idiot. Of course, an idiot like you wouldn't be able to sense me. Who told you that? Did that person help you escape from my sight? The old man was shocked. With his tracking skills, he was actually being tracked by someone else, and he didn't even know. Moreover, that person had the ability to make a trash kid like Jun Moxie escape his tracking. This was too terrifying. What kind of strength did that require? If this person was an enemy, how would I know who that person is? Jun Xia continued to bluff. I've never seen him before. Oh. Of course. How could a trash like you be able to meet such an expert? So, it was that man's idea to get rid of me? Did he give you the idea? The old man's first impression was the strongest, and he was even more certain that this debauchee definitely did not discover his ability. However, there was still a glimmer of hope in his heart. After all, he was extremely confident in his tracking and anti-tracking skills. He was bewildered. Could it be that the Supreme Shen Xian had his eyes on me? No, could it be? The more he thought about it, the more he panicked. In fact, this old man's methods were indeed impressive. Otherwise, with the abilities of the King of Assassins, Jun Xia, how could he have spent 3 days dealing with him? Of course. I say, old man, are you done yet? Why are you always talking about these things? Where are you going to take me? Hurry up and send me home. Jun Xia felt a little uncomfortable. He cursed in his heart. Hurry up and send me home. I need to use the Hungjun Pagoda to heal my injuries. What if I get exposed somewhere else? Bullsh *T. You're injured to this extent. If I don't treat you now, you'll be dead before we get home. The old man was a little unhappy. With my skills, I was actually tracked. Motherfucker. If I go straight back to the Jun family, your old man will complain and be depressed to death. If I don't take care of this kid, how can I go back at such a shameful time? As they were talking, the two of them arrived at a small house. The old man crouched down and carried Jun Xia into the house. He placed Jun Xia on the ground and began carefully inspecting the wounds on Jun Xia's body. After inspecting them from top to bottom, he could not help but click his tongue in wonder. On Jun Xia's chest, a sword had seemingly pierced through his chest. Additionally, there were also two distinct purplish-black bruises on his chest. It was obvious that two kicks had landed on his chest at the same time. Considering the skills of those silver-level assassins, any one of them would be enough to take his life. Yet, this kid had been stabbed in his vital areas and kicked twice, yet he was still alive and could even speak. This was not the most shocking part. What was truly outrageous was that not even one of his ribs was broken. The old man carefully used his Xian Qi to examine his meridians. There was no damage to his internal organs. His eyes could not help but widen. Wasn't this stab a little too coincidental? It actually stabbed into the crevice. This kid's luck was a little too good. Brat, you didn't hire that bunch of killers, did you? Why did they take care of you so much? Looking at your injuries, I highly suspect that you two must have colluded. You want to play the hero and save the damsel in distress? The old man stroked his beard and squinted his eyes. His appearance was as wretched as one could imagine. Almost choking on the old man's sudden words, Jun Xia did not know whether to laugh or cry. Old man, you really dare to think too much. This young master almost lost his life. Is there such a thing as a hero saving the damsel in distress? What are you waiting for? Hurry up and help me with my thigh. Can't you see that it's still bleeding? Jun Xia was somewhat speechless. This old man is already so old, why does he seem to have no sense of propriety when doing things? Is there anything wrong with this? Why did his grandfather hire such a person to follow him? Bah, bastard kid. Do I need you to teach me how to do things? The old man blew his beard. Kid, you're lucky. You won't die. You won't be crippled either. As he said that, he patted his thigh in revenge. It's fine now. Jun Xia's thigh had just been stabbed by a sword. Although the bone was not injured, the muscle was pierced through. It was a real knife with two holes. Now that he was patted by the old man, he immediately felt 100 sorrows and pain. He gritted his teeth and took a few breaths. Beads of sweat had already seeped out of his forehead. He hissed and asked through his teeth, "Old man, do you have a granddaughter?" The old man immediately became vigilant. He glared at him. "What do you want?" But he forgot why this kid asked him to treat his thigh. The sword on his chest was much more important than his thigh. "If you have a granddaughter, I will rape her first and then kill her. My heart will ache to death, you heartless old man." Jun Xia scolded in his heart. "Can't you see that I'm seriously injured? And you're still patting my wound?" "Oh, what I mean is, it's more attentive to let a woman do this kind of work. How can a man not lower his head when he's under the eaves? That won't do." The old man shook his head. "You're a pervert. Who in the entire Tianxiang city doesn't know that?" Jun Xia was completely speechless. "Who said I'm a pervert?" "The pervert is obviously Jun Moxie, not me." By the time the old man finished treating Jun Xia's wounds, it was already late at night. Of the two, one was impatient. He wanted to use the Hungjun Pagoda to heal his wounds as quickly as possible. But, he didn't have the opportunity to do so. So, he was extremely annoyed. The other one was thinking, who is the expert who discovered me and tracked me? These two heartless fellows didn't even think of sending a message to their families first. Murong Qianjun, who had solemnly promised Princess Ling Meng that he would report to the Jun family, immediately threw this small matter out of his mind. But, what the two of them didn't expect was that Princess Raimu had already sent a letter to the Jun family before the old man arrived. She had informed them that Jun Moxie had gone missing. They didn't expect that because of this delay, Jun Zhantian's anger would soar to the ninth heaven, and he would almost massacre the entire capital. The Tang family's courtyard was also in a state of mutual hostility when the assassins attacked Princess Raimu's convoy at nightfall. Chapter 66. Old Master Tang's face was gloomy as he stood on the doorstep. His eyes flickered with a faint trace of desire. After much difficulty, Grandfather Tang finally managed to find a clue that might or might not even be considered a clue. Grandfather Tang could not wait any longer. Making a move during the day would cause too much of a commotion, but Grandfather Tang did not intend to wait any longer. Night had just fallen and all the experts of the Tang family had already gathered. 246 people. 2 mid-level Earth Xian level experts, 4 Jade-leveled Xian level experts, 12 Gold-leveled Xian level experts, 36 Silver-leveled Xian level experts. The rest were all experts at the peak of 9th level Xian Qi. For this operation, Old Master Tang Wanli had gathered all the experts of the Tang family inside and outside the capital. In less than an afternoon, this was the strongest force that Old Master Tang could muster. It was also the foundation of the Tang family. There was absolutely no room for failure in this operation. Today's operation, our target is the Northern City clan. Tang Wanli looked around with a gloomy expression. Attention! All members of the Northern City clan, you must. Do not let a single one of them escape. Especially the high-ranking members of the Northern City clan. Do not kill, do not indulge, capture them alive. Do all of you understand? Understood. Everyone replied in unison. Although they did not know why they had to deal with the Northern City clan, they also felt that using such a large force to deal with a mere Northern City clan was making a mountain out of a molehill. However, seeing the gloomy expression on Tang Wanli's face, none of them dared to say a word. This operation will be personally commanded by this old man. If anyone of the Northern City clan manages to escape, then bring your head to me. Old Master Tang gave the harshest command. He slowly looked around and saw that everyone's expression had changed from the casual attitude they had when they first heard about the Northern City clan to a cautious one. Old Master Tang waved his hand. Move out. 246 people dressed in black robes walked out of the door without a sound. Old Master Tang's black cloak fluttered in the night wind as he strode down the doorstep. Although he was old, he was still hale and hearty. It could be seen that the strength of each step represented the old man's indomitable determination for tonight's operation. Wait. I'll go too. Following the voice, a big meatball wrapped in black cloth rushed out of the inner courtyard. Tang Yuan's figure was not suitable for night travel, so he did not have any clothes for night travel. However, he still wanted to join in the fun. Unfortunately, his figure was a little too fat. In the end, he simply wrapped himself in a black cloth and rushed out just like that. Get lost. In the darkness of the night, in a large house. This was the headquarters of the Northern City clan. Old Master Tang's white beard fluttered in the wind as he calmly arranged his men. More than 100 high-level cultivators surrounded the mansion so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Everyone held their breaths, not daring to make even the slightest sound. They quietly waited for Old Master Tang's command. As for the other 100-plus cultivators, Old Master Tang had already divided them into 4 groups. They were to charge towards the 4 halls of the Northern City clan, the gambling dens and other places that belonged to the Northern City clan, and even the homes of the Northern City clan's leaders. Old Master Tang's intention was to simply take action. They would attack from outside to inside, leaving no one alive. They would capture them all in one fell swoop. Only at the last moment would they deal with the headquarters of the Northern City clan. At present, there were more than 100 high-level cultivators surrounding the mansion. The people inside were like turtles in a jar. There was absolutely no hope of escape. Capture whoever comes out. In addition, they could use this method of killing with a blunt knife to probe the attitude of the Northern City clan. If the Northern City clan remained unmoved and allowed themselves to be dealt with, then it would mean that the Northern City clan had nothing to do with the Tang residence robbery. Even if they were related, it would only be a trivial matter. However, if they were to put up a desperate struggle, then Old Master Tang would believe that he had caught a big fish. Even now, Old Master Tang was still skeptical about the information provided by Tang Yuan. In fact, he was very skeptical about it. The young debauchee Jun Moxie had discovered a clue, and the young debauchee Tang had returned to report it. No matter how you look at it, the credibility of this information was too low. Who would believe it? AI, this old man was muddle-headed and desperate to find a doctor. Let's just consider it as getting rid of the scourge for the people. However, if I were to find out that this matter was actually a plot by these two debauches to take revenge, even if Jun Zhantian were to stop me, this old man would still capture Jun Moxie and Tang Yuan and give them a good beating. I will beat Jun Moxie into a fatty man and beat Tang Yuan into a skinny man. Let's swap their bodies. Humph. Old Master Tang's face turned gloomy as he secretly gritted his teeth. Looking at the gradually increasing number of bundled-up captives, Old Master Tang sighed inwardly. He had already made up his mind to go back and teach these two debauches a lesson. These two fellows had too much courage. It had been half an hour since they had surrounded this big mansion. They had captured every single person who came out of the mansion, sealed their internal energy, bound their hands and feet, gagged their mouths and piled them up here. The number of people there was already quite a lot. Logically speaking, there should have been some sort of reaction from the inside. However, up until now, there had not been the slightest bit of movement from the inside. All of them were so obedient. It seems that the Northern City clan could not possibly be the ones who stole the Xian Dan. True, what kind of joke is the Northern City clan? They dared to provoke the tiger's whiskers of my Tang family. In the distance, figures could be seen everywhere. The experts of the Tang family returned one by one. Each of them carried a few people in their hands, all of them tightly bound up. The mopping up of the Northern City clan's periphery had ended. Old Master Tang's heart was filled with disappointment. His face twitched and he cursed in his heart, Tang Yuan. Jun Moxie. This old man will never forgive you two bastards. To think that you would gang up and use this old man as a spear. This old man must. Old Master Tang did not have the time to think about what to do. At that moment, countless black-colored human heads suddenly emerged from the walls of the Northern City clan's mansion. Each of them had their bows knocked and a hail of arrows shot towards the experts of the Tang family who were lying in ambush outside. At the same time, a shout came from within and people rushed out from the front door, back door, side door, and the top of the wall. It was as though a bomb had gone off and they were scattering in all directions. They actually dared to start a war without a declaration. They did not even have the attitude to negotiate with Old Master Tang. Moreover, they were all scrambling to escape, all of them hating their parents for not giving them two more legs. What does this mean? Damn it! Such an intense reaction. How is this any different from a rebellion? Old Master Tang stared with wide eyes, his eyeballs seemingly about to pop out from their sockets. This sudden change in situation caused the old man to be unable to comprehend it. After a long time, he slapped his thigh fiercely. Paw! It was so painful that he sucked in a breath of cold air. However, his heart was filled with excitement. There's hope. Several muffled groans rang out. The experts of the Tang family were all experts with different levels of skill. Moreover, the situation was too abrupt. In an instant, several of them were hit by arrows and sustained serious injuries. As for the rest of the men, they charged towards the Northern City clan members. The sounds of swords clashing against each other rang out in rapid succession. In an instant, the two sides were locked in a fierce battle. Purple, black, silver and gold flashed out at the same time. The entire area appeared incomparably dazzling. From the moment the Northern City clan members fired their arrows to the moment they charged out to fight, it was a long story. However, the time interval between them was very short. It was as though everything had happened at the same time. Chapter 67. Old Master Tang's eyes widened in surprise. His originally gloomy face suddenly turned into an inexplicable excitement. His hands trembled in excitement. His eyes shone with a look of relief. The old Marquis Tang, who had been calm for half his life, finally let out a string of expletives as his white beard trembled. Fuck. There is actually a connection. It might even be the main character. Motherfucker. Who would have thought that this brat, Tang Yuan, would make such a great contribution? Who said that a blind cat could not find a dead mouse? This old man will definitely reward him well when I return. Thinking of this, old Master Tang's face suddenly turned awkward. He looked around like a thief. Tang Yuan's mother, I cannot scold him like that. That is my daughter-in-law. For Northern City clan to react in such a manner, it must be related to the robbery of the Tang family. Otherwise, how could a mere Northern City clan dare to attack the family of the Marquis of the Empire and the Minister of Revenue, a first-rate family in the entire Tianxiang kingdom? This was simply eating a bear's heart and a leopard's gall, a cat licking the tiger's nose. This was a classic case of seeking death and extermination. Seeing the members of Northern City clan coming out one after another, being thrown to the ground and tied up, old Master Tang coughed a few times and stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes were like an eagle's and his face was as calm as still water. His beard fluttered in the wind as he stood there motionless, a dignified air about him. Bang! One of the Northern City clan members was sent flying. Before he could fall to the ground, a rope was wrapped around his waist. The rope quickly circled him a few times before he fell to the ground, turning him into a big dumpling. Pang! A punch landed on his face, causing his teeth to fall out. Before he could even scream out in pain, a smelly cloth was stuffed into his mouth. Next, he was tossed into the air, flying several zhang away. The whole process was as smooth as moving clouds and flowing water. Bang! When he landed, he found that he was surrounded by familiar faces. Bang! Another one. Bang! The 240-plus experts of the Tang family slowly advanced from outside to inside. Not a single drop of water could escape, not a single drop of water could escape. The Northern City clan's clan leader, Qin Hu, was being besieged by 3 gold-leveled Xian Qi practitioners. No matter how hard he tried, he was unable to escape. His face was filled with despair. Not too far away, there was an Earth Xian expert with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at him indifferently. He couldn't charge out, he couldn't retreat, and he didn't even have the chance to commit suicide. If it weren't for the fact that the 3 of them wanted to capture Qin Hu alive, he would have long since stepped into the netherworld. Great Sect Master Qin was about to go crazy. The surroundings were gradually cleaned up. One by one, the experts of the Tang family gathered around. Some of them even rushed into the mansion with a swoosh and started a carpet search. They were almost as meticulous as tearing down a house. They did not miss a single spot. They even dug 3 feet into the ground to check the color of the soil in the places that might or might not have a secret passage. Not long after, there was a burst of jubilation. Found it. Old Master Tang's face lit up and he walked forward. He saw a few experts of the Tang family carrying a person out. It was Qin Hu's son, Qin Xiaobao, and a few gorgeously dressed women. Qin Hu had hidden them in the most secret chamber of the clan. Originally, he wanted to rush out alone. Even if he couldn't survive, he hoped that he would be lucky enough to save his son. He didn't expect that the Tang family would be so good at raiding houses. The secret chamber was nearly 1 zhang underground and the exit was very well hidden. Yet, they were still able to find it. Seeing his son being captured, Qin Hu was completely disheartened. He had completely lost the courage to resist. He was already in a difficult situation. If not for the fear that he would risk his life to fight, he would have been captured alive long ago. At this moment, he had completely lost his will to fight. His attacks were no longer methodical. The 3 gold-leveled experts moved forward at the same time. Qin Hu fell down like a lump of soft mud. His body's senses were still functioning normally. Only the control of his body, or the authority to control his life and death, no longer belonged to him. It was a complete victory. Old Master Tang slowly walked in front of Qin Hu. He lowered his head and looked at Qin Hu's dejected face. He waved his hand and the people around him tactfully retreated to the side. They left a large empty space in the middle. "Where is that thing?" Old Master Tang said in a low voice. His eyes were like sharp arrows as he looked at Qin Hu's eyes. He went straight to the point the moment he opened his mouth. He wouldn't give Qin Hu a chance to deny it. This sentence could easily give Qin Hu an illusion, which was, "I already know that you are the one who stole the Xian Dan. I already have absolute evidence in my hands. It all depends on whether you want to cooperate or not." As long as Qin Hu was one of the people involved in this matter, when he suddenly heard this sentence, and when he was a prisoner, there was a 90% chance that he would break down. As expected, Qin Hu was tongue-tied. His eyes revealed complete despair. Old Master Tang, who was closely observing his every reaction, was overjoyed. His heart that had been hanging in suspense for a long time was finally at ease. As expected, it was the mastermind. Tang Yuan, oh, Tang Yuan. This grandson has finally done something proper. Moreover, it's a very serious matter. He's promising. Wait, this matter seems to have been reminded by that debauchee of the Jun family, Jun Moxie. Old Master Tang immediately sighed in his heart. It seems that having a group of debauches isn't necessarily a bad thing. At the very least, they are still useful at crucial times. Take this old man for example. Didn't everyone call me a debauchee in the past? Isn't it still the same now? Cough cough. Realizing that he was thinking too far, Old Master Tang immediately came back to his senses. He had already decided in his heart that regardless of whether or not the Xian Dan was found, the Tang family would at least owe Jun Moxie a huge favor this time. It seems that I have to get closer to the Jun family in the future. How would I know anything about the Xian Dan? Tang. Old Master, I don't know why you suddenly treat us like this. Qin Hu answered in a flustered manner. His eyes flickered as he tried to deny it, hoping for a fluke. "You brat, you really don't know how to talk big. Did this senior say that it was the Xian Dan?" He, it doesn't matter if you don't know. I will let you know soon enough." Old Master Tang smiled kindly. With a wave of his hand, an expert from the Tang residence carried the mud-like Qin Xiaobao over. Throwing him on the ground, he turned around and walked away. "Qin Hu, I heard that this is your only son. No matter what happens to the Northern City clan, as long as you tell me what you know, I can guarantee that your son will be fine. I will also protect the last remaining descendant of the Qin family from harm." Old Master Tang wanly chuckled, his attitude extremely amiable. "Of course, if you can't remember it no matter what, I believe you will soon see what will happen to your son. But in that case, it won't be very pleasant for everyone. You know what I mean, right? Father, save me." Qin Xiaobao cried out miserably. For this typical spoiled second generation, this year was simply a year of disaster for him. With great difficulty, he finally saw a beautiful woman on the streets, but before he could do anything, he had only said a few flirtatious words when he was captured and brought in, breaking his dantian and crippling his profound energy. With great difficulty, he had finally recovered and was able to move freely, but when he went to a restaurant, a ball of snot was thrown on his face. He had only cursed a few words when he was beaten up and even had his leg broken. He had just returned home crying for his father and mother and was currently recuperating when such a thing happened. With his broken leg, he was carried out and thrown on the ground. He was scared, flustered, and in pain. Old Master Tang slowly reached out with his hand. His dry palm gently patted Qin Xiaobao's neck, as if he was comforting a frightened puppy. However, no one would doubt that if Qin Hu's answer made Old Master Tang even the slightest bit dissatisfied, that dry palm would immediately turn into the token of the King of Hell's soul-chasing token. Qin Hu sighed dejectedly, hung his head, and said, "You win." Old Master Tang smiled proudly. Qin Hu, as expected of a clan leader. You know how to judge the situation. Not bad. The sharp sarcasm entered Qin Hu's ears, causing his face to turn red. This extreme humiliation caused his face to turn incomparably ugly to behold. He stammered a few times before saying with much difficulty, "I believe old Marquis also understands that I was instructed to do so. Otherwise, even if I had the courage to do so, how would I dare to steal something from Tang Manor? Isn't that courting death? Even if I had the heart, I do not have the ability to do so. However, as the saying goes, a knife is placed on our necks. We have no other choice. Continue." Old Master Tang's eyes flashed. Chapter 68. Old Master Tang was a man of the ways of the world. He knew that Qin Hu's northern city clan would not dare to behave atrociously in front of the Tai Sui clan. At this juncture, it was even more impossible for him to utter such a lie. If what he said was true, then there must be more to it. Seeing that Old Master Tang seemed to believe his words, Qin Hu could not help but feel hopeful. Even if he was unable to escape, at least his son would still have a chance to live. He quickly continued. I do not know the background of the person who ordered me to do this. I only know that this person has eyes and ears everywhere. Even the layout of the old Marquis's residence, the location of the hidden treasures, and even the timing of the attack were all planned by that person. I believe that he should be from the capital. As Qin Hu spoke up to this point, his eyes suddenly bulged out in anger. His eyes were filled with fear and he shouted in panic. Old Marquis, save me. At this moment, a sharp whistle suddenly sounded in the sky. Yellow light surged, and a huge pressure came crashing down from all directions. Without any warning, the entire sky seemed to suddenly have a few small suns, and a thick earthy yellow light filled the entire sky. Earth Xian experts. 3 vigorous figures descended with lightning speed, forming a triangular formation as they charged towards Old Master Tang. All of them were dressed in black and their faces were covered, revealing only a pair of bright yellow eyes. The experts of the Tang family cried out in alarm. One by one, they rushed forward without a care for their own safety. Unfortunately, they were limited by their own strength and were unable to stop the advance of the Earth Xian experts. Old Master Tang sneered and shouted. Scoundrels, you dare! His white beard fluttered in the wind and his entire body emitted a thick yellow light. He brazenly rushed forward, shielding Qin Hu behind him. The other party's intentions were very clear. They were clearly here to silence him. However, Qin Hu was Old Master Tang's only lead to retrieve the Xian Dan. How could he let them succeed? No matter what, he must stop them. He must not let them harm Qin Hu's life. As long as Qin Hu was here, there would be a chance to find the mastermind. Find the mastermind and retrieve the Xian Dan. Only by retrieving the Xian Dan could the Tang family build a foundation that would last for 100 years. Old Master Tang's eyes turned red. Boom boom boom. Tang Wanli moved back and forth. With his own strength, he forcefully blocked 3 experts of the same level as him. His movements were bold and unrestrained, and he attacked without defending. He was like a mad tiger. It was naturally not a big problem for these people to kill a mere Qin Hu. However, if they were to kill Old Master Tang here, then they would be going against the entire Tianxiang Empire. This was not a consequence that just anyone could bear. Therefore, Old Master Tang was fearless. In a short period of time, he had single-handedly held up 3 Earth Xian experts of the same level. The 4 of them formed a circle and started to fight. The entire place was filled with shadows of people and dust was rising everywhere. The other 2 Earth Xian experts of the Tang family were afraid that their master would be killed. So, they quickly joined in the fight. These 6 experts were fighting in pairs and no one below the Earth Xian level could get involved. Take Qin Hu away first. Old Master Tang shouted. It was at this moment that a faint blue light flashed gracefully. A masked man in white suddenly appeared. He floated over like the floating clouds and flowing water. In the darkness of the night, his white robes were particularly conspicuous. His movements were confident, as though he was taking a stroll in the park. However, his speed was extremely fast. Along the way, the blue light flashed a few times and 4 miserable screams rang out simultaneously. The heads of the 4 hall leaders of the Northern City clan burst open and their corpses slowly fell to the ground. Tian Xian beginner level. Tian Xian expert. 200 experts of the Tang family swarmed forward and formed a heavy defensive line. However, that man completely ignored them. It was as though he was walking into an uninhabited land. His body floated up and flew 30 feet forward. A blue light flashed and Qin Xiaobao, who was lying on the ground, could only let out a muffled groan. His chest and abdomen had already been smashed into pieces. Old Master Tang Wanli let out a roar and turned around to face the man in white. The man in white's eyes flashed with disdain. A blue light flashed and a pair of palms collided with Old Master Tang's. Old Master Tang let out a muffled groan and his white beard trembled as he retreated a few steps. The man in white spun and floated away. Along the way, the experts of the Tang family were all blocked by his tyrannical Xian Qi. Without turning his head, he sent out a palm strike. Behind him was already Qin Hu. Qin Hu's eyes widened and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He screamed. So, ruthless. Old Marquis Tang, he is that. As he said that, he suddenly let out a miserable cry. His entire body fell to the ground. Not a single bone in his body was left intact. He. The man in white laughed softly and shouted. Let's go. With a flash of blue light, he took the lead and rushed out. Several banging sounds could be heard as the people of the Tang family staggered backwards. In a flash, they had already reached the wall. With a flash of yellow and blue light, 4 people leapt onto the high wall. The 3 Earth-level Xian Qi experts leapt off the wall and disappeared. The man in white remained standing on top of the wall, his white robes fluttering in the wind. He cupped his hands and said in an elegant voice. Old Marquis Tang, I have no choice but to offend you today. The mountains are high and the rivers are long, we shall meet again in the future. With a long laugh, he leapt up and with a flash of blue light, the sky returned to darkness. Grandfather Tang clutched at his chest and let out a few muffled coughs. He could sense that this man in white was truly powerful. He had indeed gone easy on him. Otherwise, that palm strike alone would have left him with internal injuries. Even so, Grandfather Tang was so angry that his entire body was trembling. Looking at the wretched corpses of Qin Hu and his son from Northern City clan, as well as the 4 hall chiefs with their brains burst open, Old Master Tang's hands and feet turned cold. Such a powerful Tian Xian expert should have appeared in his own family. He was truly unwilling to accept this. It was not easy for him to find such an important clue. Yet, just as he was about to succeed, he was silenced. The 200-plus people who represented the strongest members of the Tang family were gathered here. Yet, they could only watch helplessly. They even had to bear the humiliation of being merciful. How could they endure this? Seeing old Master Tang gasping for breath, everyone around him lowered their heads in shame. It was at that moment that a heavy, deep and majestic sound rang out from afar, resounding through the heavens. It was like a tidal wave rolling in from the horizon. Yet, it was also like muffled thunder in the sky. The sound was slow yet endless. It carried with it an unparalleled aura that could sweep through the heavens and shatter the clouds as it slowly approached. As the sound rang out, the entire heaven and earth seemed to become filled with endless killing intent in an instant. Even the darkness of the night seemed to become exceptionally heavy. The sudden sound did not slow down because of the passage of time. Instead, it grew louder and louder. In the end, it rang out from all directions of Tianxiang City. Following the initial dull rhythm, it slowly caught up to the rhythm. Then, it converged into a huge torrent that resounded throughout the entire heaven and earth. This was the thunder god's war drum. This was the prelude to a massacre. This earth-shattering sound of the drum was the spark for a large-scale war. The general's gathering drum. After 10 years of silence, the highest command of the Tianxiang Kingdom's military rang out again in the silence of the night without any warning. Once the general's gathering drum rang out, it would signify mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The slaughter of thousands of soldiers and thousands of soldiers, the death of countless lives. This also meant that there would be a group of brave warriors who would close their eyes for eternity. There would also be a small group of survivors who would tread on mountains of corpses and seas of blood to reach a higher position. In all directions, countless soldiers were startled awake from their sleep. Turning over, they quickly put on their clothes. Everyone's eyes shone with a crazed and bloodthirsty light. It's Marshal Jun's general's gathering drum. An Earth Xian expert from the Tang family cried out in shock. Everyone looked at each other in shock. Chapter 69. Today is the last day this book will be on the list of new books. There is no need to say unnecessary words. Brothers and sisters, please give me some face. Tang Wanli's eyes widened in shock, his mouth agape. The sudden sound of the war drums made him forget all the shame and displeasure he felt earlier. His mind was filled with only one thought: Jun Zhantian has gone mad. This old man, why did he go mad? Why did he go mad when the Jun family is at its weakest? Everyone, return to the Tang family immediately. Those who hold a military position, quickly change your attire and report. The rest of you, without my orders, are not allowed to take a step out of the house. Old Master Tang made a prompt decision and issued a series of orders. Immediately, dozens of people bowed, turned around and hurriedly ran away, their speed even exceeding the maximum speed they could muster. At this time, the beating of the general's assembly drum indicated that the situation had reached a very dangerous point. No one doubted that if any officer dared to be late tonight, their heads would roll. Jun Zhantian's military discipline was second to none in the entire Tianxiang kingdom. Anyone who disobeyed his orders, regardless of whether they were nobles, aristocrats, or descendants of dragons, would all be killed without mercy. The sound of galloping horses could be heard from all directions, rushing like a tide towards the center of the city. Everyone wore bright armor, their faces anxious, the whips in their hands continuously lashed on the warhorses they loved more than their lives. All of them galloped as if they were rushing 800 li at top speed. Marquis, what should we do with the rest of the trash? An expert from the Tang family pointed at the remaining members of the Northern City clan and asked. Bring them back and interrogate them one by one. Although old Master Tang knew that this would not be effective, he still held on to that last bit of hope. As the warhorses galloped past in batches, all the barracks within and outside the city simultaneously sounded the loud sound of bugles. All troops were urgently assembled and maintained the highest state of combat readiness, awaiting the return of the commanding officer from the General Assembly platform. Then, they would immediately move out. Grandpa June was going mad. This was not a lie. By the time Princess Ling Meng sent 2 men to the June residence, half an hour had already passed since the assassination attempt. Grandpa June was reading a book in his study, a smile on his old face, a look of satisfaction on his face. My grandson turned over a new leaf and turned over a new leaf. Looking at his vigor and perseverance, none of the nobles in the entire Tianxiang city could compare to my grandson. How could Grandpa June's heart not be filled with relief when he saw the June family at such a withering moment, when such a great hope and opportunity had appeared? Just as his mood was at its best, the housekeeper, old Pang, gently knocked on the door and walked in with a heavy expression on his face. He informed him that Princess Ling Meng had sent someone to report something to the old master. Jun Zhantian immediately summoned the guard. However, when he saw the guard's body covered in blood, Grandpa June's heart skipped a beat. The guard's stammering and evasive words made Grandpa June feel that something was amiss. His face turned uglier and uglier. Old Pang stood behind Jun Zhantian with a worried look on his face. This made Jun Zhantian feel something. After a series of interrogation, the bodyguard finally said, "The 3rd young Master Jun's body has disappeared." It was just this short sentence. When Jun Zhantian heard this, it was as if thousands of thunderbolts had simultaneously exploded in his head. His tall and sturdy body swayed a few times. Suddenly, his face turned deathly pale and he fell backward without a sound. In an instant, he was no longer breathing. The old man was shocked. Fortunately, he had made preparations beforehand. He pinched Grandpa June's acupoint and pounded on his chest. Finally, Grandpa June regained consciousness. The bodyguard trembled as he knelt on the ground, not daring to move an inch. Everyone knew how important this debauchee young Master Jun Moxie was in Grandpa June's heart. If he did not respond appropriately, he would be met with a fatal disaster. The moment Grandpa June woke up, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His complexion instantly turned ashen and his eyes dimmed. However, the words that came out of his mouth were still clear and deep. What exactly happened? Slowly, without missing a single word, tell me everything. Although his voice was low, the heaviness in his words was like a towering mountain, pressing down heavily. The bodyguard's face had long since turned pale from fear as he slowly described what happened. Throughout the entire process, Grandpa June's face remained calm and he did not utter a single word. Finally, when the bodyguard finished speaking, Jun Zhantian powerlessly waved his hand and said, "You may leave." The bodyguard felt as if he had just been granted amnesty. He trembled as he retreated, only to find that his entire body was soaked in sweat. In the study, Jun Zhantian closed his eyes and raised his head towards the sky. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down as a single tear flowed out from the corner of his wrinkled eyes. If Jun Moxie was still the debauchee Jun Moxie of the past, committing all sorts of outrages, Grandpa June would not have felt so bad. That was because he had long been disappointed. Turning this into despair was not a big deal. The June family's decline was already a foregone conclusion. Even if this day came early, it would not be a big deal. However, the problem was that Jun Zhantian had just witnessed the astonishing changes in his grandson. He had just seen the dawn of hope. Her lips opened as if she wanted to say something. However, in the end, she did not say anything. She stretched out her palm and made a gesture in the air. It was as if she was feeling something, or as if she was saying her final farewell. Grandpa June narrowed his eyes slightly. It was as if he was holding back something. Then, he suddenly turned around and picked up the sword that had been dusty for many years. His tall and sturdy body strode out of the room. His white hair floated in the air, and he did not look back. The moment he turned around, 2 drops of tears fell onto the ground, shattering into sparkling pieces. The portrait on the wall was of a benevolent old woman. She still had the same eternal smile on her face. Her eyes seemed to have penetrated through the portrait and extended into the distance. The night wind blew in through the window, causing the portrait to flutter. It was as if the portrait was powerless to stay. Chapter 70. The housekeeper, old Pang, stretched out his hand and pulled on a thread behind Jun Zhantian's armchair. An ear-piercing bell rang throughout the Jun family's courtyard. Then, he silently followed behind Jun Zhantian, his face cold and resolute. He had already guessed what Jun Zhantian was going to do next, but he would not stop him. Not only would he not stop him, he would also follow. No complaints, no regrets. Downstairs, a wheelchair quietly sat there. Jun Wui sat upright on it, his two sword-like eyebrows emitting a murderous aura. Seeing his father coming down, Jun Wui's face was expressionless. He met his father's eyes and turned their heads, not saying a word. At this time, there was no need to say anything. Dozens of dark figures rushed over from all directions and stood quietly in 3 rows in the courtyard. They looked at Jun Zhantian calmly. No matter what Jun Zhantian wanted to do, these people would follow him until the end of time. Amidst the layers of shadows, there were countless people gathered like ghosts, quietly waiting for orders. The Jun family's hidden forces were mobilized without reservation. Grandpa Jun stepped forward and spoke a few words in a low voice. Then, the hands hidden in the shadows suddenly receded like a receding tide, disappearing without a trace in an instant. It was as though the sky was filled with the stench of blood and the howling of the wind in the middle of the sky had become even more intense. After standing silently for a while, Jun Zhantian faced the fresh night wind and took a deep breath. He felt as if he had inhaled a thick stench of blood, choking his lungs. Turning over, Jun Zhantian mounted his horse. His blood-red cloak fluttered in the night wind, fusing with the color of blood. The rest of the people silently mounted their horses and followed him. Jun Wui patted the armrests of his wheelchair, and his body soared into the air, and steadily landed on the back of a horse. He shook the reins, and followed the horse. The sound of hoofbeats gradually faded away, and eventually disappeared. In a flash, the military headquarters was brightly lit. Jun Zhantian, dressed in his military uniform, sat upright in the main hall. Outside, 40 drums sounded at the same time. As the drums sounded, a continuous stream of people dressed in military uniforms, helmets and armors, galloped over. When they reached the platform, they dismounted from their horses and stood as straight as javelins. More and more people came, but none of them said a word. They only looked at Jun Zhantian, who was sitting high up in the commander's seat. Their eyes were filled with incomparable fanaticism. Old Marshal. It's been a long time, since I last beat the General Assembly drum. Those years when the flames of war raged through the skies, how nostalgic. The drums stopped. Below the stage, many generals stood solemnly. On both sides, dozens of large flags fluttered in the night wind, as if 1,000 people were crying at the same time. Jun Zhantian got up from his seat and walked to the stage. His sharp eyes swept across the crowd as he asked, "Is there anyone who hasn't arrived yet?" "We are all here. We await the old marshal's orders." Hundreds of people shouted in unison. "All right. Let this old man do something earth-shattering tonight." Jun Zhantian's sharp eyes emitted an unconcealable killing intent. "Listen up, generals. Here. Chen Zhounan. Here. I order you to lead your troops and guard the west gate. Without my order, no one is allowed to leave the city. If there is any disturbance, immediately send troops to suppress it." Jun Zhantian emphasized the word anyone. "Yes. Jun Nianfeng. Here. You are in charge of the east gate." "Yes. Zhan Tingtian. Here. North gate." "Yes. Chan Linyu. Here. South gate. The rest of you, follow me." A series of orders were issued. Everyone stepped forward to receive the token and turned to leave. No one asked why. These were all Jun Zhantian's former subordinates. They were also the backbone of the Jun family's military. They had always followed Jun Zhantian's orders without any questions. Even if it meant death. Especially Chen Zhounan, Zhan Tingtian, Chan Linyu, and Jun Yanfeng. They were Grandpa Jun's foremost capable generals. They were also unruly and iron-blooded war maniacs. They only obeyed Jun Zhantian's orders, regardless of whether they were right or wrong. They were also the backbone of the Jun family's military. One by one, the generals received their orders and left. Jun Zhantian's eyes grew colder and colder. Mo Xia, your grandfather will avenge you. Anyone who has ever gone against you, anyone who is suspicious, will be buried with you tonight. Just as the war drums started, late at night, in the imperial palace, the emperor of Tianxiang Kingdom, Yang Huaiyu, jumped up in shock and shouted, "What is that sound?" This emperor, who was once in the prime of his life, felt an inexplicable sense of danger. It was as if something earth-shattering was happening. Outside the bedchamber, a feminine voice said, "Your Majesty, it seems like the sound of war drums." The sound of war drums? The emperor frowned and was suddenly shocked. War drums. The general's gathering drum. His expression changed. He got off the bed and draped a cloak over his body. Wearing only his undergarments, he quickly walked out and listened for a while. His expression gradually became solemn. Jun Zhantian. The emperor could immediately tell that it was Jun Zhantian's war drums. Apart from Jun Zhantian's general's gathering drum, there was no other sound in the capital that was as majestic and tragic as this. Only Jun Zhantian's war drums could display such power, enough to shake the entire Tianxiang city. What the hell happened today? This emperor does not know. The emperor's face darkened as he slowly asked. At this moment, anything could be done, but he could not be anxious. Only by knowing what had happened could he understand why Jun Zhantian would beat the general's gathering drum at this time. Only then could he adopt a targeted strategy to resolve the situation. This servant does not know. The 6 servants beside him knelt down at the same time, none of them able to answer. Investigate. Reporting to Your Majesty, this servant remembers that Princess Ling Meng had requested an audience with Your Majesty 2 hours ago. I do not know what the matter is. A middle-aged eunuch cautiously stepped forward from behind the emperor and replied in a feminine voice. Raimu? What happened to her? Raimu has always been well-behaved. If there was nothing important, she would not disturb me at this time. Why didn't she report it to me? Who dares to be so bold as to interfere in this matter? The emperor immediately realized that something was wrong. The eunuch stammered, unable to speak. His eyes kept drifting towards the bedroom. Quickly summon Raimu. Yes. Concubine Meng. Come out. The emperor roared angrily, and a beautiful woman covered in fine muslin walked out and knelt on the ground. Let me ask you, why did Raimu come to see me? Why did you stop me? The emperor's eyes were as cold as ice, without the slightest bit of warmth. The princess, she said that she was assassinated, but this concubine saw that she was unharmed, and her mannerisms were the same as usual. I only knew that it was a child's mischief. Besides, Your Majesty had already fallen asleep at that time, so this concubine did not dare to disturb you. Concubine Meng replied, trembling with fear. My daughter was assassinated, and you still stopped her from seeing me, her father. You actually dared to cause trouble? Ha ha ha, you are truly my beloved concubine. The emperor's tone was gentle, as if he did not take it seriously at all. However, concubine Meng, who was kneeling on the ground, was already trembling. She knew that once the emperor spoke in such a tone, someone's head would definitely fall to the ground. The emperor gently moved closer to her ear and whispered, I think you don't have the guts to do it yourself. However, the matter that eldest brother promised you is definitely not going to be fulfilled. I will not let him do it either. Concubine Meng immediately widened her eyes in fear, and her whole body collapsed to the ground. Take Concubine Meng away, banish her to the cold palace, and await punishment. No one is allowed to come into contact with her. The emperor was very calm, but he announced the fate of Concubine Meng, who was once above tens of thousands of people. Father. Princess Raimu hurried over, her hair a little messy. Don't be anxious. What happened today? Come, tell Imperial Father everything. Tell me in detail. The emperor looked at his daughter and smiled benevolently, as if nothing had happened. The coldness in his eyes was subtly hidden. Imperial Father, when we found Jun Moxie's corpse, no, when his body was missing, I sent someone to inform old Master Jun. The moment the messenger left, that old man came and carried the injured Jun Moxie away. Princess Raimu was at a loss, unable to speak. And then? The news had already been sent, but when you found out that Jun Moxie was not dead, did you not do anything to remedy the situation? His Majesty looked at his daughter in disappointment, but his heart skipped a beat. Old man. Could it be that there was someone else besides that bastard Yi Guhan who was secretly protecting my daughter? If that's the case, His Majesty thought to himself, but his face remained expressionless. Such an important piece of news naturally had to be remedied. At that time, my imperial bodyguards were all seriously injured, so I had Murong Qianjun send someone to inform old Master Jun that Jun Moxie was not dead. If old Master Jun did not receive the news that Jun Moxie was not dead, then the only possibility is. There is no need for that possibility. It is obvious that Murong Qianjun did not go to deliver the news. Or perhaps, he only went to deliver the news of Jun Moxie's death. Otherwise, he would not. His Majesty sighed, and a sinister expression appeared on his handsome face, but it quickly disappeared. There is nothing else for you to do, go and rest. As he said that, he stroked Raimu's hair, and his empty eyes looked at the hazy yellow color of the imperial palace. His Majesty suddenly felt that this yellow color, which represented nobility, was actually very glaring to the eyes, and very vexing to the heart. This assassination attempt is a little strange, ha ha ha, how unexpected. His Majesty pondered for a moment, and a sharp glint flashed across his eyes. Perhaps, it is time to wash the imperial palace. I wonder if it will look a little brighter if I wash it with human blood? In the distance, the earth-shattering sound of the war drums had already died down, but the atmosphere was still filled with an oppressive atmosphere. I hope, Jun Zhantian, I hope you will not make things too difficult for me. His Majesty's eyes revealed a complicated expression, and it disappeared in a flash. Looking at his daughter's departing figure, His Majesty stood with his hands behind his back, and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he said, Shadow, go out and take a look. Do not make a move unless it is necessary. Tell Jun Zhantian that his grandson is not dead. It is fine to cause a ruckus, but do not go overboard. Bring me something on the way. It is convenient. That old thing has been holding back for a few years. After saying that, His Majesty wrote a few words, rolled it up, and handed it over. Go. A gust of wind rose, and a seemingly formless figure floated out. The next moment, the slip of paper in His Majesty's hand disappeared, and a faint shadow flew out of the imperial palace. Although I am letting you be presumptuous this time, I also want to borrow a knife. His Majesty whispered to himself, and a trace of a meaningful smile suddenly flashed across his face. His Majesty had always taken every possibility into account, but this time, he had far underestimated the extent of Jun Zhantian's rage. Moreover, it was already too late for him to send someone over now. Men, summon Great General Dugu Wudi. His Majesty let out a sigh of relief, and said loudly. I might as well throw the situation into chaos again. Hope, one by one. As long as one understands, they will restrain themselves a little. Those who do not understand, naturally do not have the need to stay, or perhaps do not have the qualifications to stay. It is not that I do not allow you to fight, but only those who fight will be the strongest. But, there must be a sense of propriety in fighting. If he went beyond this limit, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. Princess Raimu bade farewell to His Majesty, and it was only when she returned to her own palace that she suddenly remembered that ever since she had gone, His Majesty had been asking about the June family and June Moxie throughout the entire assassination process. His Majesty, who had always doted on her the most, had not even asked about the fact that she was the main target of the assassination. Why is this? Could it be that, in his father's heart, this assassination, which was full of suspicions, involved a princess, and involved him? Even the major cases involving other members of the imperial family are not as important as the June family. Or is His Majesty avoiding something? Or, thinking of His Majesty's deep gaze, Princess Raimu could not help but tremble. Fortunately, I have Uncle Ye's protection, and that mysterious expert. While in a daze, Princess Raimu reached into her bosom, and took out the 3 small and exquisite throwing knives, and played with them in her hands. The throwing knives were only half the size of a palm, and their slightly curved curves were beautiful and natural, as thin as a cicada's wings. Even when the 3 throwing knives were stacked together, they were only a thin layer. Princess Ling Meng was very curious. How could such a small flying dagger display such a terrifying power? It was capable of causing a group of cold-blooded killers to flee without a fight. The throwing knives were silent, and their bodies flashed with a sparkling luster, and under the light, they were extremely dazzling. If one only saw this kind of throwing knife, they would definitely think that it was something used by children from rich families to play with. Who would have thought that it was a deadly weapon of a peerless expert? But, as long as this kind of unique throwing knife appears in front of me again, I will immediately recognize it. Princess Raimu thought happily, and her heart was filled with endless fascination. I wonder what kind of person this peerless expert, whom even Uncle Yi admires so much, is? This chapter has been going over and over again since this morning, and has been revised countless times. I don't feel very satisfied. When it comes to this kind of climax, it is perhaps the most difficult time for all writers, Although my head hurts from thinking about it, I also feel a sense of accomplishment. Could this be pain and happiness at the same time? Regarding the issue of updating, I hope my brothers and sisters can understand again. Chapter 72. Great General Dugu Wudi returned home with a belly full of depression. He was already completely confused. When he heard the war drums from the barracks outside the city, he immediately rushed back to the city with his personal guards. The first thing he did was to wait for the emperor to summon him to the imperial palace. He had even given the order for his soldiers to prepare for battle. In the event that Jun Zhantian were to revolt, only the Dugu family's army could protect the emperor and contend against Jun Zhantian's army. However, His Majesty's unusually warm attitude left Dugu Wudi scratching his head in confusion. Such a serious matter could cause great changes in the country at any time. Even the imperial palace was not an impossibility. But the emperor had only said 4 words, "Don't be impatient." Then he told me to go home and find my old man. He didn't even allow me to return to the barracks or take any defensive measures. This is too unimaginable. Dugu Wudi fainted. Dugu Wudi returned home with a belly full of depression. He did not even have time to return to his courtyard. The first thing he did was to find his father, Dugu Zongheng. But the result was that Dugu Wudi, the great general who commanded thousands of troops, was even more embarrassed. "Are you a pig? You bastard! You dragged me out of bed just for this trivial matter. You unfilial son! How did I raise such a useless thing? Don't go out and call yourself my son. I can't afford to lose my face." Dugu Wudi was very angry. His voice was so loud that the entire residence could hear him. Spittle sprayed all over his son's face. He pointed at Dugu Woody's forehead, causing him to stagger. Don't you use your pig brain to think? Is your brain filled with dog shit? Rebellion? T. I'm telling you, even if my Dugu family revolts, Jun Zhantian will not. Even if His Majesty revolts, Jun Zhantian will not rebel. Hurry up and go back to sleep. I can't be bothered with you. You're a complete pig. Stupid pig. Motherfucker. Finally, he kicked Dugu Woody out of his room. Dugu Woody returned to his bedroom angrily. A muffled groan followed by a voice. Old thing. What did you just say? What the fuck? Who the fuck was invincible? If he's a pig, who the hell are you, you old thing? Was his brain filled with dog shit? You pig. You're a pig through and through. What followed was a series of muffled groans that were forcefully held back in order to save face. Great General Dugu Woody rubbed his buttocks, his face full of resentment. He thought bitterly in his heart, I'll twist this old thing. Serves you right. Confused, he returned to his own courtyard, only to find that it was noisy and brightly lit. Madame and the concubines of the third branch were not asleep yet, and their faces were full of worry. When they saw him return, they immediately surrounded him. After asking, he found out that his daughter ran back crying in the afternoon. Her tears flowed down, and no one could persuade her. She locked herself in her room and didn't come out until now. It seemed that she had been bullied. The gloomy Dugu Woody suddenly became furious. Nothing was going his way. What? Who would dare to bully my precious daughter in the Tianxiang city? See if I don't bring an army to exterminate them. Panting with rage, he led his wives into his daughter's room. He didn't even try to hide it, and coaxed his precious daughter for a long time. Finally, his daughter stopped crying, and drank a bowl of bird's nest porridge. Only then was he able to relax. Who was it that bullied my baby? Tell me, and I'll exterminate them. Dugu Woody's face was somewhat sinister. He looked at his daughter's swollen eyes, and couldn't help but feel heartache. A manic voice in his heart shouted, I'm going to explode. Father, Dugu Xiaoyi had been waiting for her father, and said in a spoiled manner, you have to help your daughter. Dugu Woody suddenly felt that something was wrong. Could it be that my daughter was? He couldn't help but ask nervously, who? It's the June family. That stinky brat June Moxie. I'm going to die of anger today. Father, you have to help your daughter. Dugu Xiaoyi pouted, and said in an aggrieved manner. Dugu Xiaoyi had been holding it in for a whole day. So, she had been waiting for her father to come back and complain. Then, she would ask for her father's permission to bring her brothers to beat up June Moxie, and take back the meteoric iron. She knew that her mother wouldn't agree, and wouldn't dare to agree. So, she didn't have that idea. Dugu Woody let out a long sigh after listening to what had happened. So, it wasn't like what I thought. Now, I can rest assured. Then, he wrinkled his brows, and suddenly felt as if his head was about to explode. Hee, my good girl, I wouldn't be afraid of anyone else. In fact, I would have caught that prince and beat him up to vent your anger. But, this June Moxia isn't easy to deal with. Of course it's not easy. Jun Zhantian doesn't know where his grandson is. How can I find him? Even if I find him, I might not dare to do anything. That old bastard had completely gone mad now. Is father afraid of Senior June? My life is so bitter. I'm so angry. Dugu Xiaoyi cried again. She turned her body, and turned her face away. She didn't know why, but whenever she thought of June Moxie's face, she would want to hit him. She would be so angry that she wished she could slap that hateful smile off his face. Sigh. It's not that. Dugu Woody was at a loss when he saw his daughter crying again. He hastily explained, it's that brat, Sigh, We don't know whether he's dead or alive. We can't find him. Let's wait until we find him. Father will definitely take revenge for you when we get back. I'll teach that brat a good lesson. Ah. He's reckless. What happened to him? Dugu Xiaoyi didn't know why, but she suddenly felt a pain in her heart. She immediately turned around, and stared at her father with her red eyes. She suddenly felt nervous and afraid. What am I afraid of? I heard that Princess Raimu was attacked by an assassin this afternoon. That guy overestimated his own abilities and rushed to report the news. The princess is fine, but that debauchee became the scapegoat. Dugu Wudi was rejoicing in his daughter's misfortune. He didn't notice that his daughter's face had turned deathly white as she spoke. Her little hands were clenched tightly, but she still continued to talk. He was stabbed in the chest. Then, a silver Xian assassin stomped on his chest a few times. After that, he was taken away. I don't know where he was taken to. In my opinion, that brat's life is in danger. Dugu Xiaoyi groaned. She was dumbstruck. Suddenly, he felt a little empty in his heart. He didn't hear a single word that his father said after that. Even his voice seemed to have become incomparably distant and indistinct. Don't worry. If that brat is still alive, I'll definitely catch him and let my darling personally spank his buttocks. Smash it, ha ha ha. Dugu Wudi laughed heartily. Only then did he realize that there was something wrong with his daughter's expression. He waved his hand in front of his daughter's face. Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi. Ah. Oh. Dugu Xiaoyi seemed as if she had just woken up from a dream. She was startled. But, her face suddenly calmed down. She slowly lay down on the bed and said in a low voice, Father, I'm tired. I want to sleep now. Okay. Then, have a good sleep. Everything will be fine after you wake up. I'll go drink a little wine to relieve my boredom. Today has been a very depressing day. Dugu Wudi shook his head and walked out. Dugu Wudi, who had an infinitely thick mental state, didn't realize that there was something wrong with his daughter. Dugu Xiaoyi pulled the quilt, and covered her entire body with it. She didn't move an inch. She heard her mother say a few words, and her aunts said a few words with concern. However, Dugu Xiaoyi didn't hear them clearly. Her heart was in a mess. She didn't know what she was thinking. She didn't know why. She just felt like crying. Her nose felt sore, and her heart ached. Her tears silently flowed out. More and more, and the quilt became wet. She didn't even know when her mother and aunts had left. Could it be that is he dead? But I haven't. Chapter 73. Jun Zhantian's face was ashen and his body was full of murderous intent. He strode out of the general selection stage, mounted his horse, and was about to ride away. There were a few places that he wanted to see turned to ashes with his own eyes. Only then would he be able to comfort his grandson's soul in heaven. Suddenly, there seemed to be a ripple in the darkness. A figure darker than the night appeared like a ghost. Although it was right in front of them, no one could see its true appearance. Shadow? Why are you here? Did His Majesty send you here? Jun Zhantian looked up and asked. This is a gift from His Majesty. The shadow raised his hand, and a piece of white paper floated into Jun Zhantian's hand. The face in the fog seemed to smile, but it appeared even more strange and frightening. The voice instantly turned into an invisible thread and drilled into Jun Zhantian's ear. His Majesty said that your grandson should not have perished yet. He also asked me to bring you 2 words, balance. He emphasized the word, balance. His voice was very dry and somewhat reluctant. It seemed that he was not used to saying so many words at once. Mo Xia is not dead. Jun Zhantian was inexplicably ecstatic. He suddenly thought of the mysterious person he had entrusted. Could it be that he had rescued my grandson? He stepped forward and asked eagerly, "Shadow, is my grandson's injury serious?" The shadow turned around and was about to leave. It seemed that he did not want to stay even a moment longer. He seemed to have no interest in the #1 military man in front of him. But when he heard Jun Zhantian's question, he reluctantly said a few more words. "He is not dead, he is seriously injured." After saying that, he turned his head and looked at Jun Wui, who was beside Jun Zhantian. He snorted and disappeared with a whoosh. The hope that Jun Zhantian had just ignited was instantly extinguished by a ball of cold water. He felt his whole body turn cold. Shadow's final glance at Jun Wui was tantamount to reminding him that with Jun Moxie's injuries, perhaps he wouldn't die, but he wouldn't be any better off than Jun Wui. Jun Zhantian's deathly still heart had just become warm when it was doused with icy coldness. Could it be that the only descendant of the Jun family will also become a cripple? As he thought of this, the rage within Grandpa Jun's heart flared up. It was a raging fury. Before this, it seemed that the Meng family and the Li family were always against his grandson. Fuck his grandmother. Regardless of whether or not today's incident had anything to do with you, I'll make an example out of you. Consider yourself unlucky. Jun Zhantian cursed in his heart as he mounted his horse. Gritting his teeth, he said, "Army, follow me. Come with me to search his house." The heavens had pity on him. When the shadow had looked at Jun Wui, there was no warning, as Grandpa Jun had assumed. In fact, there was another reason. This night was destined to be a night of slaughter. Following Jun Zhantian's soaring rage, the entire imperial capital was shrouded in the smell of blood. Warhorses galloped back and forth within the imperial capital. One after another, the homes of the imperial court's officials were set ablaze. The sounds of weapons clashing could be heard, as well as miserable screams. Before the shadow had even made his move, countless men in black had already appeared from the darkness like ghosts. Their faces were covered as they jumped into the officials' residences. Some of the officials' residences did not even have the time to resist. Their blades fell and blood splattered everywhere. Assistant Minister of Justice Meng Jiyu and Li Qiao belonged to the Li family and Meng family's camp. They belonged to the First Prince's faction and were usually at odds with the Jun family. Tonight, these two families bore the brunt of the calamity. While the war drums were still beating intensely, several masked men in black had already jumped into the residences of the two families. Starting from the guards' rooms, the corpses rushed into the main hall and then into the bedrooms. The two pitiful officials did not even have the time to speak before their heads were chopped off. Following that, not a single family member was spared. Following that, flames soared to the heavens. When Imperial Censor Tai Yan heard the sound of the war drums, this old censor who had opposed Jun Zhantian for several years because his son had fought alongside Jun Zhantian in the war was filled with righteous indignation. Thinking that the opportunity to overthrow Jun Zhantian had arrived, he got out of bed and spent the night drafting a memorial to impeach Jun Zhantian. He was only halfway through when suddenly, the doors and windows of the residence were smashed open. Several masked men in black burst in like ghosts. They grabbed the unfinished memorial and looked at it. With a sneer, they curled the memorial into a ball and stuffed it into the poor old man's throat. Then, with a swish of their blades, the memorial was cut into two. The other two families were officials from the Ministry of Rights, Qian Wangguan and Wu Yun, who had defected to the second prince's camp. Their residences were a little far away from the city gates. When they heard the Jun family's drums, they immediately felt that something was amiss. Knowing Grandpa Jun's style, they immediately made a wise decision. They immediately packed their belongings and prepared to leave the city overnight to avoid the storm. However, when they reached the city gates, they were surrounded by the imperial army. The leading officer shouted for the assassins to be captured. At the same time, he rained down arrows, not giving them any chance to defend themselves. He immediately gave the order to kill. More than 100 members of the Qian family were turned into porcupines at the southern city gates. Even their faces could not be distinguished. On the other side, nearly 60 members of the Wu family were killed at the western city gates. Their corpses were chopped into pieces. Then, they were doused with kerosene and set ablaze. The stench of burnt corpses filled the entire 9 heavens. Beside the corpses of these 2 families, 2 tall wooden signs were erected, the fate of the assassins. There was also a single imperial censor, Shen Zhongyun, who had woken up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet. However, he was discovered early in the morning. It was unknown how long he had been holding himself in for. These officials, who normally held high positions of power, were now like a flock of lambs surrounded by a pack of wolves. For a moment, it was as if the end of the world had arrived in the capital. Grandpa Jun's rage had thoroughly ignited the entire imperial capital. Tonight's events had far exceeded His Majesty the Emperor's expectations. When he found out about it, he was so enraged that he smashed everything he could see. The Jun family's secret power was fully revealed. It was like a demonic, bloodthirsty massacre. In this restless night, they had used blood and lives to shock the entire upper echelons of the imperial capital. It had also ruthlessly stabbed into many people's hearts, causing many of them to be in a state of panic. Everyone was pondering. Faced with such an irresistible power, what should they do? Should they consider the issue of choosing a new side? This was especially true for the 3 princes. Each of them had summoned all of their aides and advisors for an emergency meeting that very night. At this moment, the Jun family's enormous power had caused the eyes of the 3 princes to turn red with envy. If only they could grasp such power in their hands, but in the midst of the discussion, the 3 princes' mansions suddenly caught fire. Following that, countless decapitated heads were thrown into the room, dripping with fresh blood. The 3 princes were scared out of their wits. The guards of the mansions searched wantonly, but not even a trace of the decapitated heads could be found. They were even chased back like ducks by the patrolling military cavalry. However, there were exceptions among the prominent families in the capital, such as the Li family, the Meng family, and the Song family. They had strong foundations, and after the sudden attack by the black-robed men, the experts of their families quickly reacted and stopped the black-robed men from killing them. However, there were still bursts of thick smoke and raging flames that rose up. In the Li family's secret chamber, several people heard the sounds of killing outside. They could not help but want to rush out. One of them was dressed in white robes. He looked to be in his 30s. His face was cold and proud. Looking at his figure and bearing, he was the white-robed Tian Xian expert who had killed Qin Hu under Tang Wanli's command. The door opened and the young master of the Li family, Li Yuran, walked in. Yuran, let me go out. The highest level of these men in black is only Yu Xian's cultivation. It's nothing. Any one of us can go out and stop them. I really don't understand. Your own family has been attacked. Why are you still so slow? Since they want to court death, we'll take care of them. The man in white frowned. He looked angry. He had always been proud and arrogant. Since when did he have to hide in a secret room and not dare to show his face? Chapter 74. So embarrassing. Yesterday, I was told that my internet connection had been cut off, but today, it's still there. No. Absolutely not. Li Yuran was still smiling calmly at this moment. I would rather the entire Li residence be burned to the ground than to act rashly. His smile was strangely gentle, cold and ruthless. As long as the people are still here, the Li family will still exist. But if the few of you go out, regardless of what happens to the men in black outside, there is one thing that I am certain of. Countless eyes will immediately focus on this place. Once your identities are exposed, or even if it's not exposed, as long as you show yourselves, then the Li family will have a hard time moving forward. Moreover, the rumor that Xian Dan is in the Li family will immediately spread like wildfire. When that time comes, the matter will be over. Senior brother, all of you stay in the secret chamber and do not come out. Once the rumor has died down, I will immediately arrange for you to leave the city. If anything happens in the future, I will seek help from master and senior brother. Li Yuran smiled lightly. This time, not only will I not stop them, I will also send a few more people for them to kill. I want to see how Senior Duke Jun is going to deal with this. This is an unpardonable crime of rebellion. Even if the courtiers can tolerate it, can the imperial family? Li Yuran's face revealed a rare sneer. Fine. Since that is the case, I will not say anything. Do as you wish. The man in white revealed a dissatisfied expression and nodded his head helplessly. Junior brother, when you have the time, go back and take a look. Master, he is very worried about you. Rest assured, senior brother. I will. Li Yuran smiled faintly and walked out. At this moment, a Chihua rocket suddenly exploded in mid-air, bursting into colorful fireworks. It was extremely beautiful. As the fireworks blossomed, all the men in black suddenly retreated. Like a receding tide, they quickly left the battlefield. In the blink of an eye, they jumped over the wall and ran out of the main gate. In a flash, they had already disappeared into the boundless night. Then, the thunderous sound of horse hooves rang out. Thousands of cavalrymen converged into a torrent. Their formation was neat and tidy, and they rushed over with an extremely murderous air. In the blink of an eye, they had gathered at the entrance of Grand Preceptor Li's residence. A series of commands rang out, and the cavalrymen split into two groups in an orderly manner. In an instant, they had surrounded the Li family's residence so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The door was slammed open with a bang, and Jun Zhantian walked in with large strides, his entire body brimming with killing intent. A sky-blue light flickered around his body. It was obvious that he had already activated his own Tian Xian Qi. However, without the Emperor's imperial decree, Senior Duke Jun barged into the residence of a first-grade imperial officer and wantonly conducted a search. Even if Senior Duke Jun is not afraid of crooked shadows, our Li family still needs to maintain some face. If word of this were to spread, it would not look good on anyone, right? Jun Zhantian coldly looked at the refined young man before him. He could not help but think of his own grandson, Mo Xie. His grandson could have been stronger than Li Yuran, but ended up suffering from such a treacherous plot. Thinking of this, Lengleng's rage flared up and she asked. What do you want? This junior would like to ask Senior Duke Jun a very simple question. Senior Duke Jun has repeatedly said that he is searching for the assassin in our residence. However, regardless of where Senior Duke got the information that my Li family is harboring the assassin, if we are unable to find the assassin in our Li family, what will Senior Duke do? Li Yuran smiled warmly and took a step forward. If that is the case, will Senior Duke Jun give my Li family an explanation? Grandpa Jun laughed loudly. Suddenly, he took a step forward and fiercely slapped Li Yuran's face. A crisp "pa" sound rang out. Then, he kicked Li Yuran's abdomen, causing him to fall to the ground. Then, Jun Zhantian angrily shouted. When this old man is searching for the assassin, even your grandfather Li Shang does not dare to fart in front of this old man. Who do you think you are? You dare to come out here and point your fingers? You want an explanation from this old man? This is an explanation. He spat out a mouthful of spittle. What a joke. If you are unable to find the assassin, then it naturally means that your Li family is innocent. If you are unable to find the assassin, then you will have to continue searching. What else can you do? I would like to ask your Li family. Every single one of you, from the old to the young, are desperately trying to stop this old man from capturing the assassin. What is the meaning of this? Could it be that your Li family wishes to rebel and is the mastermind behind this plot to assassinate the princess? If the assassin who tried to assassinate the princess were to escape while you are trying to stall for time, how many heads does your Li family have to bear this crime? These words were directed at Li Shang. It was obvious that the Li Yuran before him did not even have the qualifications to speak to him as an equal. Even if two armies were to face off against each other, there was still a need to consider the difference in status. If one did not have the qualifications, then they would only be courting death. It was not that Li Yuran did not understand this point. However, seeing her grandfather being humiliated in front of her own eyes, coupled with the fact that there were several people in the secret chamber who could not see the light of day, if they were to be discovered, it would be akin to having mud fall into one's pants. Even if it was not shit, it would still be shit. She could only brace herself and come out, hoping that Jun Zhantian would be able to rely on his demeanor as the #1 person in the military to block this matter. Who would have thought that Jun Zhantian would not only throw away his demeanor, but also his face? One slap and one kick, both quick and ruthless. Although Li Yuran was a genius in martial arts, she was limited by her age. At present, she was only at the initial level of the Gold Xian realm. The gap between her and Grandpa Jun's Tian Xian was like that of the heavens and the earth. In addition, she was caught off guard and received a solid slap and a kick. She felt as if her head was going to explode and she was seeing stars. Although Grandpa Jun did not utilize his Xian Qi, Li Yuran's slap under the watchful eyes of nearly 1,000 people felt as if it had struck his heart. Chapter 75. Li Yuran silently stood up from the ground, a vicious glint flashed across his eyes. Maintaining his cultured and refined demeanor, he smiled modestly and said, "Senior Duke Jun is right to reprimand this junior was rude. I hope that Senior Duke Jun will not take offense." He continued to smile as he looked at Jun Zhantian. His smile was sincere and actually contained a strong sense of shame, as if he was very embarrassed by his actions earlier. Jun Zhantian's eyes widened as he suddenly felt an indescribable pressure. This kid, with his calmness, is definitely not a simple character. He is probably a ruthless character who can kill people. He could not help but sigh in his heart, if Mo Xia is fine, this kid will probably be his greatest opponent in the younger generation. Lengleng turned around and sneered, the Li family's seed is indeed sinister. Grand Preceptor Li Shang's beard trembled in anger. Jun Zhantian's words were enough to curse 18 generations of the Li family's ancestors. Everyone get out of the way and let him search. If he cannot find the assassin, old man Jun, tomorrow at the Golden Palace, this old man will have a good discussion with you in front of the Emperor. Let's see if you still have the courage to do so. Li Shang waved his hand at Lengleng, flicked his sleeves, turned around and sat down under a flowering tree. He closed his eyes and remained motionless. Jun Zhantian waved his hand, search carefully. Do not miss a single place. Do not miss even the slightest clue. Nearly 1,000 soldiers behind him replied in unison and fiercely rushed in. In an instant, the entire Li family's mansion was thrown into an unprecedented state of chaos. Not far from the Li family's mansion, an ordinary-looking sedan chair was parked. 4 people stood at the 4 corners of the sedan chair with indifferent expressions on their faces. The curtains of the sedan chair were slightly lifted and a pair of deep eyes looked in their direction, carefully listening to the commotion. This person's thin face was slightly squarish, but his 2 eyebrows slanted out like 2 azure dragons soaring in the sky. Even if he didn't speak or move, he had an awe-inspiring aura that emanated from him without being angry. After listening for a while, he closed his eyes and muttered, Jun Zhantian's confrontation with the Li family this time was a bit excessive. The Li family naturally had many secrets related to their own safety that could not be revealed. Once they were revealed, the Li family would most likely be gone. Jun Zhantian is obviously not willing to give up so easily, but the empire cannot do without the Li family. He frowned as if he had a headache and said softly, Shadow, if there's any abnormality, you'll have to step forward and resolve this farce. There was no sound from outside, but this person knew that his order had been clearly accepted. He closed his eyes again. His fingers lightly tapped on a small jade tea table beside him. His eyebrows gradually knitted together like two azure dragons. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. Li Shang's eldest grandson, Li Yuran, is indeed a talent, but a very dangerous talent. Jun Zhantian's soldiers searched along the way, overturning all the chests and cabinets. Crashing sounds could be heard everywhere. It seemed that these people were not here to search for the assassins, but purely to cause destruction. Bang! A huge vase was thrown out and smashed into pieces. Grand Preceptor Li Shang's face twitched fiercely. That was the only one in the world. Bang! Bang! Grandpa Jun's face was cold as he watched with his horsewhip in hand. Panting heavily, he shouted, "Search ruthlessly for me." Even though it was such a serious moment, everyone behind him turned their heads and snickered. Search, can the adjective ruthlessly be used to describe it? Jun Zhantian's choice of words was clearly not professional. It was more accurate to say, smash. Ruthlessly smash. This old man is quite interesting. He's afraid that others won't know that he's deliberately causing trouble. Might as well watch for a while longer. The person in the palanquin could not help but smile. Following the words ruthlessly, the soldiers searched even more forcefully. Nearly 2,000 soldiers rushed into the Li family's residence. It was as if they were attacking an enemy's city during a war. Some fell and some were smashed. The people of the Li family gathered in the courtyard and watched, their hearts bleeding. That was all money. After watching for a while, the person in the palanquin closed his eyes and said in a low voice, "There shouldn't be any major problems. Let's go back." He then lowered the curtain and leaned back on the soft seat, closing his eyes to rest. That old man Jun Zhantian had clearly understood his intentions. He only smashed and smashed in conspicuous places, but did not touch any of the Li family's secret areas. It seems that nothing major will happen here. I want to see, after such a ruckus, which aristocratic family in the capital will still dare to casually pick a side. The person in the palanquin smiled. Fighting must be controlled within a small area. If it endangers the country, then today will be a warning. The palanquin rose and left without a sound. Jun Zhantian remained motionless. Jun Wui, on the other hand, looked back indifferently after the palanquin left. Reporting to the marshal, there is no trace of the assassin. One soldier after another came to report. Following that, reports came from all directions. None of them had found anything. Jun Zhantian became furious and shouted, "Could it be that the assassin flew into the sky? Is he not in the Li family? Let's go take a look elsewhere." He turned around and led the soldiers out. Then, he mounted his horse and galloped in the direction of the Meng family's residence. The Li family members looked at the courtyard that looked like a beggar's nest. They wanted to cry but had no tears. The imperial examiner Li Shang patted his waist and sat up with difficulty. Li Yuran hurriedly went forward to support him. The grandfather and grandson looked at each other and saw the anger in each other's eyes. They also saw a little bit of luck. Grandfather, anyone with a discerning eye would be able to tell that those men in black were Jun Zhantian's subordinates. Jun Zhantian is a thief crying, "Stop thief," and imposing a groundless crime. This is no different from rebellion. Since we didn't manage to find the assassin, Grandpa can bring all the officials and report him to the court tomorrow. Li Yuran pondered and said, Jun Zhantian has clearly shown signs of going crazy. He mobilized his troops and broke into the houses of the court officials to search for them. If the Li family's wealth is exchanged for the fall of the Jun family, grandfather, this is still a good deal. On the other hand, if grandfather doesn't make any moves, I'm afraid that we will be suspected of having a guilty conscience. Li Shang frowned and sighed deeply. He then said in a heavy tone, Yuran, you are talented and intelligent. You are able to foresee the enemy's schemes. You can be called the number one person in the younger generation. However, you still have some shortcomings. For example, politics. You're still a little too young, and your foresight is also a little lacking. Politics? Li Yuran was somewhat puzzled. Jun Zhantian's crime is not enough for His Majesty to punish the Jun family. Enough? Not enough. Far from enough. Li Shang's white eyebrows trembled. The anger and helplessness that he had displayed in front of Jun Zhantian had disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by endless scheming. It was obvious that his previous cowardice had been feigned. You still don't understand the importance of Jun Zhantian in His Majesty's heart. I'll simply tell you that His Majesty's life has been saved at least 6 times by this old man. If Jun Zhantian had any intention of rebelling, or had even the slightest bit of ambition, he would have already ascended to the throne. It is true that the Tian family has no relatives, but they will never truly put those who are absolutely loyal to them to death. This is the fundamental reason why the Jun family has been able to suppress the 3 armies even though they have no successors. Do you really think that you can topple Jun Zhantian based on what you've just done? Li Shang laughed mischievously. Do you really think that Jun Zhantian is so brainless that he would offend our Li family? Moreover, do you really think that Jun Zhantian's actions have offended us to the point of no return? Li Yuran was very intelligent. She instantly understood a lot. Her complexion changed as she said, "Don't tell me, well, inform our brothers and sisters that we will update them from tomorrow onwards. We will update them at 9:00 in the morning and 18:00 in the evening. If there are 3 updates, we will update them at noon. There will be an explanation at that time." To be honest, I have been updating at midnight every day in order to rush up the rankings. My schedule has been completely messed up, and I have been very tired. Thank you brothers and sisters for your support during this time. It is finally going to be published. It will be pushed out next week. The explosion that everyone is looking forward to will begin on the 1st of May. Feng Ling will fight side by side with everyone until the end of this book. Thank you. Chapter 76. Li Shang smiled sinisterly. If it wasn't for His Majesty's instructions, the Li family would have been littered with corpses, not a single person would have survived. Jun Zhantian's original plan should have been like this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have mobilized the army with such great fanfare. But there must have been a reason for him to change his mind. In the entire Tianxiang kingdom, there is only one person who can make Jun Zhantian give up on this idea, and that is His Majesty the Emperor. Oh yes, there is another person, and that is that debauchee Jun Moxie. You just told me that there is a 90% chance that the debauchee is already dead, but I'm afraid that may not be the case. If Jun Moxie is really dead, even with His Majesty's interference, old man Jun may not be willing to let the matter rest. Therefore, Jun Moxie's life should not be in any danger, and this news should have just been received by old man Jun, so today, even old Jun Zhantian is helpless. In this matter, we seem to be innocent and unlucky, but I believe that there are people more unfortunate than us. Li Shang smiled. Her Royal Highness was assassinated, and this matter has stung His Majesty's heart, so Jun Zhantian has gone mad. His Majesty is using this opportunity to reshuffle the 3 princes. All the families and officials who have been close to any one of the 3 princes will definitely be warned, banished, and punished tonight. As for those in the imperial palace, I'm afraid they have already been dealt with. It's a pity that our preparations have been wasted. Jun Zhantian's madness this time was unexpected, but it was inevitable. If we had controlled Jun Moxie, that old man would have already gone mad. And His Majesty is taking advantage of this madness, and then, His Majesty will use this opportunity to weaken the Jun family's military power, and then suppress the other families. The one behind old Jun is the Emperor. And the one who is truly brilliant is the Emperor. Do you think he can topple old Jun? Li Yuran was somewhat shocked. He had never imagined that these political veterans would think so far ahead. In fact, they had even tried to figure out each other's thoughts. This was especially true for the person who stood at the highest position in the Tianxiang Empire. His Majesty is a man of great talent and strategy. Naturally, he doesn't want his successor to be an incompetent person. So, he wants the three princes to compete for the top position, but he doesn't want things to get out of hand. So, if things go too far, he will get rid of all of them and start over again. Therefore, although the three princes often fought openly and secretly, the real big families in the capital would never rashly get involved. This is the biggest reason. Remember, let bygones be bygones. Before the situation is absolutely clear, don't take sides. Look at tonight. Li Shang pointed at the black smoke floating everywhere in the sky. All those who stood in line in advance are now in the sky. If that's the case, are we just going to forget about what happened today? Li Yuran asked. How can I just let it go like this? Even if our Li family is willing, His Majesty will not. Li Shang slyly smiled. So, we will definitely report to the Emperor tomorrow. That way, His Majesty will have a reason to suppress all the big families and achieve his ultimate goal. If we don't cooperate, it will be very difficult for us in the future. Li Yuran fell into deep thought. He had been smart since he was a child, and was always able to draw inferences about other things. Whether it was civil or military, he was a genius among geniuses. But now that he heard these words, he realized that he was still young after all. In the end, he still lacked political awareness and foresight. Gently stroking the spot on his face where Jun Zhantian had slapped him, Li Yuran's eyes turned as cold as a viper's. Jun Zhantian, I will never forget this slap of yours in my life. The same chaos was happening in the Meng family. The Meng family was tossed around even more thoroughly than the Li family. Jun Zhantian had practically destroyed their house. But even so, Jun Zhantian was still very depressed. Because this wasn't his original plan at all, and it wasn't the result he wanted the most. After this incident, the capital would be peaceful for a long time, at least on the surface. I wonder how Xia is doing right now. Is there any hope of recovery? This is really worrying. Jun Zhantian let out a long sigh. Mounting his horse, he glanced at the crying Meng family members behind him and urged his horse forward. His complexion was not much better than the Meng family members. Since His Majesty said that Xia is not dead, then this old man will help His Majesty again. It is worth it. But this matter is a bit anticlimactic. This old man's original intention was to kill all these people. Even though I have killed more than half of them, I have not been able to kill the one I wanted to kill the most. At this moment, an anxious voice suddenly rang out. Jun Zhantian, you old man. That's enough. Jun Zhantian's body trembled, as if he could not believe his ears. He slowly turned around and his eyes widened. His face suddenly revealed an expression of ecstasy. A skinny and withered old man flew in front of him, carrying a person in his arms. The old man was panting and sweating profusely. But Jun Zhantian did not care about him. He floated down from his horse and took the person from the old man's arms. With a trembling voice, he said, Xie. These two came back at the right time. Just when the curtains were about to fall, they came back just in time. Jun Xie looked at the old man in front of him who was suddenly overjoyed. It was obvious that he had just walked out of despair. The old man hugged him as if he was hugging the world's most precious treasure. The deep wrinkles on his face contained deep concern. The ecstasy of regaining something that was lost caused his fingers to tremble. His old eyes were red with excitement. Jun Xie's heart trembled violently. This was a man who commanded millions of troops, a tough man who had returned from hundreds of battles on the bloody battlefield. The moment he saw that his grandson was still alive, he was suddenly overjoyed. It made him look like a frail old man in his twilight years. That deep affection and kinship, at this moment, Jun Xia actually felt a sour feeling from the bottom of his heart. This feeling was very warm, very comfortable, and there was also a feeling of his nose turning sour. Jun Xia suddenly felt that his throat was a little blocked and his nostrils seemed to be unable to breathe. He had a feeling of wanting to cry. Was this the kinship that he had dreamed of? In both past and present lives, who had cared about him so much? In both past and present lives, who could mobilize an entire country's army for him? In both past and present lives, who had been so desperate for him? Who had been in such despair for him? Who had been so overjoyed for him? Who had been so disregarded his reputation, his life, his family, for him? Looking at the old man in front of him, Jun Xia did not doubt that this old man could completely pierce a hole in the sky for him. Because, he was his only hope. His only hope. Grandpa. Jun Xia's nose turned sour and these two words blurted out. Ever since he came to this world, this was the first time he was willing to call out this form of address from the bottom of his heart. In both his past and present lives, this was the first time. Yes. This is my grandpa. Not only Jun Moxie's grandpa, but also my grandpa. He is my grandpa, Jun Xia's grandpa. At the side, Jun Wui's crippled body floated down from the horse and sat on the cold ground. Looking at Jun Xia, his eyes were full of gratification and surprise. And satisfaction. In his pair of tiger-like eyes, there were crystal-clear tears, but he secretly turned his head and let them fall. Then, he turned back and smiled gently, "This is my family. Should I still resist? No." At this moment, Jun Xia suddenly accepted this body and this family. He accepted this world. Whether it was his mind or his heart. For this old man in front of him, for this family. From now on, I am Jun Mo Xia. I am a member of the Jun family. Tianxiang country, Tianxiang city, Jun family. This is my family. Grandpa Jun was so moved that tears almost flowed down his face. Although his grandson looked like he was on his last breath, he was still alive. Moreover, his injuries did not seem as serious as the rumors said. God bless me. As long as he is not dead. As long as he is not dead, everything is fine. The joy of regaining what he had lost caused the old man's eyes to become moist. His body trembled slightly, on the verge of collapsing. This night had been torturous. Starting from tomorrow, we will update from 9 to 6. Update until further notice, try not to update in the wee hours or in the middle of the night. Everyone should get a good night's sleep and keep their bodies strong, haha. Chapter 77. In the imperial court the next day, the disputes between the various parties were even more intense than the farmers' market. After the customary greetings to His Majesty, there was a moment of silence, as if waiting for the rain to come. This was not surprising. Before the storm, there would always be a suffocating silence. His Majesty, the Emperor, looked at the dozens of empty seats and the tall pile of memorials to impeach Jun Zhantian. He could not help but feel somewhat startled. Although this was within his expectations, it was still very unexpected. Isn't this too much? Although he had received the news last night and was furious, it was only a few names on a piece of paper. Looking at it now, almost half of the imperial court was empty. This feeling was too direct. For example, let's say a student is in a class with 100 students. At night, when he heard that 30 students had dropped out or transferred schools, he would not feel anything. But the next day, when he was faced with an empty classroom, this ratio was not much different from the current imperial court of Tianxiang. Last night, with the assassination of the princess and Grandpa Jun as the starting point, Tianxiang city was filled with flames of war and murderous intent. More than 10 high-ranking officials of the imperial court were beheaded. Among these people, there were many who claimed to be enemies with the Jun family. Apart from this characteristic, there was another common point. These people had already sided with one of the three princes. However, everyone was well aware of this common point, so they would not say it out loud. Speaking nonsense at this critical juncture was no different from courting death. Among those who were killed last night, there were a total of 12 people who were qualified to stand here. Unbiased, they belonged to the three princes' camps, with 4 people from each faction. Among them, there was an assistant minister from the Ministry of Justice, 2 assistant ministers from the Ministry of Personnel, 1 deacon, 3 officials from the Ministry of Rights, 1 official from the Ministry of Revenue, 3 imperial censors, and 2 grand scholars. And these were only those who could be seen in front of them. How many more could not be seen? The death of all these people at once could be said to be a great shock to the imperial court. It could even be said to be in danger of shaking the foundation of the country. However, all of this was under the operation of a certain expert. Although this expert was currently so angry that his eyes were blue, there were also some ministers who had good eyesight, good memories, and were well informed. They noticed, intentionally or unintentionally, that there seemed to be quite a number of unfamiliar faces in the palace this time. Most of the familiar or even very familiar faces had disappeared, such as the leader of the armed guards, Murong Qianjun. It could be said that he had been promoted 3 times in a day, and the speed at which he rose through the ranks was extremely rare. However, this extremely rare rising star of the Murong clan had now disappeared. It seemed that the blood in the palace was no less than the outside world. Many people began to feel uneasy. What happened last night? Why are there so many people missing today? Who can tell me? His Majesty was an expert in the Politburo. He closed his eyes and glared at Jun Zhantian, who was resting with his eyes closed. Old Master Jun was very tired last night. It could be seen from his face. Otherwise, how could he be like this in the imperial court? He was just short of snoring. His Majesty's words, which clearly showed that he was ignorant, opened the curtains to the attack in the imperial court. Suddenly, a large number of people knelt down in the main hall. Your Majesty, you must uphold justice for us. A large group of ministers had tears in their eyes. They kowtowed as if they were pounding garlic. Ministers, if you have something to say, please speak in detail. The emperor frowned, a puzzled look on his face. As soon as these words came out, dozens of ministers immediately opened fire at old Master Jun Zhantian. Some accused him of disregarding the military laws of the empire and mobilizing the troops for his own selfish reasons. Some accused him of disregarding the laws of the empire and disregarding the dignity of the royal family. Some accused him of breaking into the residences of the ministers and allowing his subordinates to smash things. Some even accused him of being lawless and guilty of the most heinous crimes. Some even accused him of having an army to protect himself and planning to rebel. In short, there were a whole series of accusations. There were at least 30 to 40 accusations, and all of them were irrefutable and true. Later on, some even suggested that Jun Zhantian should be removed from his position and investigated. He should be executed by 1,000 cuts. His entire family should be beheaded and his 9 generations should be exterminated. Everyone's faces were flushed red with indignation. In the end, it reached a point where, without killing Jun Zhantian, we will not be able to cleanse the emperor's side. Without killing Jun Zhantian, we will not be able to appease the people's anger. Jun Zhantian stood with his head raised. His eyes were slightly closed as he looked at the performance of the ministers. He was worried about his grandson's injuries. He was thinking about how to ask the emperor to bring the best imperial physicians home, Jun Zhantian. Old man, what else do you have to say for yourself? His Majesty the Emperor's voice was very strict. It seemed as if he was about to explode in anger. Your Majesty, please allow me to report. Yesterday, this old official heard that the princess was assassinated on the main road outside the imperial palace. Although the princess was blessed with great fortune and did not suffer any injuries, the assassins were so deranged and desecrated the imperial family's dignity. This old official was truly furious. I also heard that the assassins may have made a follow-up move. Moreover, they may have targeted the members of the imperial family and the imperial court. This old official was afraid that any delay would result in a disaster. Therefore, I did not have the time to report to your majesty. This old official has indeed made a rash mistake. Your majesty, please investigate this matter and punish me. The emperor's mouth twitched. He forcefully endured it. Old man, you've already said it so clearly. How am I supposed to investigate this matter? You make yourself sound so righteous. If I were to punish you, wouldn't I be an incapable emperor? How do you expect me to continue? Continue. His Majesty the Emperor frowned, seemingly displeased. If I don't continue, I really don't know how to continue. Yes. This old official was worried about this matter. Without reporting to your majesty, I woke up in the middle of the night. I did not even have time to change my attire before rushing to the drill grounds. Although I was able to mobilize the troops quickly, the assassins came prepared. In an instant, the city was thrown into chaos. This old official bravely took the lead and charged forward. Bathed in blood, I fought bravely against the countless assassins. Finally, I managed to contain the disaster and even killed all the assassins. The assassins numbered in the hundreds. Their corpses were hung on the city gates for public display. However, this old official did not dare to claim credit for it. Although this old official did everything he could, there were still dozens of officials who were killed by the assassins before they could wait for this old official's rescue. This was all because this old official's actions were too slow, resulting in such a tragedy. This old official is willing to accept this crime of negligence. Grandpa June let out a long sigh. His voice was filled with sorrow. Those were the pillars of our Tianxiang kingdom. Rubbing his eyes, he appeared to be sighing. However, he was actually feeling sleepy. Hearing Grandpa June's words, all the ministers in the hall looked at each other in dismay. What? Accept the crime of negligence? Accept your mother's head? Look at what you're saying. You are the great minister who saved the entire Tianxiang kingdom. You acted decisively and turned the tide. You were the pillar that held up the country. Moreover, you protected the dignity of the imperial family's most loyal minister. If I don't reward you fiercely, you will feel that you have suffered a loss. You still want to accept the crime? Besides, who here doesn't know that those men in black yesterday were from your June family? Assassins? What a joke. What do you mean by inverting black and white? What do you mean by confusing right and wrong? That's it. I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen such a shameless person. To think that killing people is like catching thieves. To think that confiscating property is an achievement. This is simply an otherworldly realm. To look up to a great mountain. As for the group of unjustly dead people that were hung on the city gates for public display, if the head of the Ministry of Justice's prison were to identify them, he would definitely find that all of them looked very familiar. They were all prisoners on death row. However, they had been executed by you, Marshal June, in advance. When I went out for breakfast this morning, a tragic incident occurred. A young lady saw me on the streets. She was riding her bicycle when she suddenly fell down. This made me feel very apologetic. I was too handsome. The young lady was entranced just looking at me. In the future, I will try my best not to go on the streets. I will write this as proof. Chapter 78. The ministers looked at him with disdain and prepared to launch another attack. Grandpa June's self-justifying argument was simply not something that could be refuted. Grandpa June was still a military general after all. The amount of knowledge in his stomach was limited. To be able to come up with a self-justifying argument was already difficult enough. To think that he would be able to come up with a flawless excuse was simply a pipe dream. Unexpectedly, an old man with white hair and beard took a heavy step forward. This old man was tall and sturdy. Standing together with Jun Zhantian, they resembled two majestic mountains. His cheeks were bursting out like a leopard's beard. His face was ferocious and his body was filled with savagery. This was Old Man Dugu, second only to Jun Zhantian in the military. The capital's #1 crocodile, Dugu Zongheng. Tianxiang Kingdom's #1 barbarian. #1 ruffian. #1 troublemaker. #1 family's leader. He was thick-skinned enough to be called a grandmaster. He treated ignorance as knowledge and used a broadsword to reason. All the civil and military officials in the imperial court were afraid of him. Even the current emperor could not do anything to him. When he stepped forward, everyone could not help but mutter in their hearts, didn't he not attend court for several years? Why is he here today? Picking such a sensitive period, this old man actually appeared here. It was a little unusual. Dugu Zongheng's round eyes widened like a bear in the forest. He cupped his fists and spoke in a rough voice, "Your Majesty, the princess, and all the court officials were assassinated. This is indeed a major event that shakes the stability of the country." Thanks to Old Man Jun Zhantian's prompt decision, this calamity was averted. This old man believes that Old Man Jun's actions were not wrong. Not only was he not at fault, he was also meritorious. A great meritorious deed. A skinny old man with a goatee sneered, "Such a traitor who brought disaster to the country and the people, causing chaos in the court. If this is considered meritorious, then wouldn't the people of the world despise him?" This man with a goatee was the third most important person in the Meng family, Meng Yufang. Last night, his house was the most devastated. Not even half a roof tile could be found intact. As a high-ranking official of the imperial court, he brought his family to spend the night in the luxurious and prosperous capital. He was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. Now that he saw the two military bigwigs distorting the truth in front of everyone, he couldn't take it anymore and jumped out. Dugu Zongheng was furious. He turned around and fiercely glared at Meng Yufang. He opened his mouth wide, exposing his yellow front teeth. His voice shook the roof tiles, "Fuck your grandmother. You sour dog shit. Are you saying that I'm wrong? Huh?" As soon as he got angry, his hair and beard stood up even straighter. He opened his mouth wide as if he wanted to swallow this thin and withered goatee in one gulp. He looked extremely ferocious. Next to him, General Dugu Wudi immediately jumped out and shouted, "Meng Yufang, what do you mean by this? My father is talking to His Majesty, how can an old brat like you interrupt?" He stretched out his large hand, wanting to grab his neck and lift him up. All the bigwigs raised their eyebrows. This pair of father and son is really unrivaled. They're actually playing hoodlums in the Golden Palace Hall. His Majesty the Emperor was the instigator of this show. He couldn't help but be dumbfounded at this moment. Enough! His Majesty the Emperor shouted angrily and stood up in a violent rage. "A bunch of civil and military officials are using filthy language in the Golden Palace Hall. Moreover, they're even fighting. Are they shrews cursing the streets?" The Emperor's anger immediately silenced everyone. Apart from the Jun family, Dugu family, Li family, Meng family, Song family, Tang family, and Murong family, everyone else, regardless of their rank, immediately knelt down and said in unison, "We have sinned. We are willing to receive punishment from your Majesty." Jun Zhantian's original intention was to capture the assassins. However, he handled the matter improperly and indeed caused chaos in the capital. He will be fined 1 year's salary and will be ordered to spend 3 months in seclusion. However, because of his meritorious service in capturing and killing the assassins, he will be rewarded with 1,000 taels of gold and 1,000-year-old ginseng. Dugu Zongheng will temporarily be in charge of the military affairs. In addition, your families did not distinguish between right and wrong and only cared about your own losses. You'll all be demoted by 1 rank. In order to avoid chaos, your family's military authority will be returned to the military for a year. After a year, you'll be punished. 1 year's salary forfeited, half a month in seclusion, and 1,000 taels of gold and 1,000-year-old ginseng. For Grandpa June, could this still be considered a punishment? This was simply a public reward and a public holiday. Only the sentence "Duga Zongheng will temporarily be in charge of the military affairs" seemed to have some other meaning. However, it was also very unreliable. All the ministers stole glances at the father and son duo of the Dugu family. Everyone thought, if this is the case, then it would be better to let that old man Jun Zhantian continue to be in charge. This father and son duo of the Dugu family are much more unreasonable than Jun Zhantian. At the very least, Grandpa Jun is quite reasonable in normal times. However, this father and son duo of the Dugu family have never been reasonable. How could their family's private army fall into the hands of this father and son duo? How many will come back? For a moment, almost everyone was cursing Meng Yufang in their hearts. Dugu Zongheng was the mastermind behind His Majesty's actions, yet you still interfered. If this isn't overestimating your own capabilities, then what is it? It's fine if you're the unlucky one, but you're dragging us down with you. Who the hell are you? Almost everyone had a dazed expression on their faces. Regardless of whether it was an act or not, at least on the surface, everyone looked very real. Standing in the imperial court, if one didn't have a few tricks up their sleeves, it would be very difficult for them to stay in the imperial court for long. Only a dozen or so people still had their heads lowered in anger. Those who felt wronged were truly angry and unwilling. However, these people were immediately remembered by all the big shots. People who can't even understand this little bit of limelight are destined to be useless. When they return, they must teach their own sons and nephews to keep their distance from these people. Otherwise, who knows when they will be dragged into the water. Your Majesty and the others are the pillars of the country. To actually act like this in the Golden Hall. We are very disappointed. Incomparably disappointed. His Majesty the Emperor was very angry, unable to restrain his anger. After a series of announcements, he said in a heavy tone, "This matter is decided. There is no need for anyone to say anything." Court dismissed. The Minister of Rights, Sun Chenghe, hastily shouted, "Your Majesty, please stay." This person was Fatty Tang's father-in-law. All the old people looked at him with disdain. Didn't you see that His Majesty was in a hurry to return to the palace to experience the pleasure he had just experienced? To be able to benefit from both sides, to rule over the world, to play with people, to control them, to suppress all the families in the capital, and to bring peace to the entire capital. What a pleasure it was! Why did you choose to delay His Majesty at this juncture? Have you thought it through? You're really stupid. What else do you want? His Majesty the Emperor was obviously very angry. He was pretending to be angry at first, but once he was delayed, the fake also had the tendency to evolve into the real one. Your Majesty, according to our court's tradition, today is the annual Golden Autumn Festival. So regarding the matter of the Golden Scholar Banquet, should it be? This Minister of Rights was obviously lacking a brain. It was not easy to be stupid. All the officials in the imperial court sighed inwardly. What kind of situation was this? Every family was mourning. Who was in the mood to care about the Golden Scholar Banquet? You brat, you're basically stupid's grandfather, old fool. You have to be careful in the future. Don't get along with this idiot. Maybe you'll fall into his hands one day. As expected, His Majesty flew into a rage. He said in a heavy tone, "Golden Scholar Banquet. We are in troubled times right now. What Golden Scholar Banquet? If my memory serves me right, the 2 ministers that I personally appointed to be in charge of the Scholarly Scholar Autumn Banquet are already on the list of those who were killed by the assassins." After saying this, he used his finger to heavily point at the list on the table in front of him. Then, he swung his sleeves and left with a face full of rage. No one saw that after His Majesty turned around, he grinned. It seemed that he was very happy, indeed, no one saw it. But, the old officials were secretly happy. As expected, they didn't get out of their own scheme. After His Majesty the Emperor left, all the people who were kneeling on the ground patted their knees and stood up. The few big shots exchanged glances with each other. Everyone had a look of, as expected, in their eyes. Li Shang snorted and glanced at Jun Zhantian. He put on a fake smile and said, "Congratulations, Lao Jun. Is your grandson well?" Li Shang had deliberately brought up Jun Zhantian's sad matter. Even if he couldn't topple Jun Zhantian this time, he could still make this old man angry. At the very least, he could make him feel disgusted. However, Jun Zhantian was immediately alerted by Li Shang's words. He didn't have the time to pay attention to Li Shang. Instead, he spread his feet and rushed in the direction that His Majesty had left. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty. I need to borrow that Imperial Physician Immortal. It's urgent." All the big shots staggered. "It's hard to understand. There's really such a thing. I'm speaking the truth. Why are you all attacking me? Could it be that you're jealous of my good looks? But, this is also pardonable. Wahaha. Being handsome is like this." Chapter 79. Dugu Zongheng squinted his eyes in disdain. "Look at this old man. His grandson is just injured, yet he's so nervous. He doesn't have the demeanor of a great general. I despise him for being ranked below such a commoner." Dugu Wudi grinned and nodded his head like a chicken pecking at rice. Yes, yes. I despise him to the extreme. Heaven and earth mourn." All the ministers shook their heads in disdain. "You Dugu family members would shout to the heavens even if you lost a piece of skin. Yet, you're here to despise Jun Zhantian. You're truly shameless." However, Dugu Zongheng's words were very convincing. "I reckon that he was the one who helped him think it through, eh? Did he think it through for a long time?" This was a shocking piece of news. Could it be that the military is at odds with each other? Thinking of this, all the old foxes muttered in their hearts. Dugu Zongheng was very happy to see his son cooperate with him. Stroking his beard, he said, "My family is still the best. Each family has more than 10 people, and each one is full of vigor. Unlike the Jun family, which only has 1 person." Dugu Wudi nodded his head like a chicken pecking at rice. That's right. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines. Just one sentence and you've revealed it again. Each family has more than 10 people. Do you think that your wife is a sow? Truly unbearably vulgar. Besides, your 3 sons have nearly 20 wives. You only have 10 grandchildren, and you still have the nerve to brag. Ignoring the father and son who were boasting and praising each other, they shook their heads and walked out to go home. Let's just treat the events of the past 2 days as a wonderful farce. If only I knew it would be like this, sigh. Not long after, the palace guards saw Grandpa Jun proudly leading an old man with white hair and beard out of the palace with a medicine box in his hand. Jun Zhantian was riding a horse. Surprisingly, he had a sedan chair with him. It seems that Grandpa Jun had even prepared a palanquin for the imperial physician before entering the palace. This was truly a meticulous and thorough plan. What is called an expert? This is called an expert. Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao lay on the bed, trying their best to look like they were dying, but in fact, they were already enjoying themselves. The little lowly Kuer carefully served him, scooping spoonful after spoonful of crystal sugar bird's nest porridge, ginseng lotus seed soup, 8 treasure hibiscus soup. In short, it was a very nutritious food that could be eaten. He ate them all with gusto. The only thing that made him unhappy was that the old man had also brought over a lot of 6th-level mystical beast blood. It was said that this was also a rare nutritious food. However, June Moxie would pinch his nose and gulp it down every time, or pour it into the bucket beside the bed when he had the time. It tasted terrible. I'm not a barbarian. Is there a need for you to feed me raw blood? How unhygienic is that? Aren't you afraid of having a stomachache? Of course, this was not the only thing that made him feel good. The key was that after this injury, June Moxie discovered that the Hungjun Pagoda in his mind was constantly rotating at a high speed. The white fog of spiritual energy coming out from it was becoming denser and denser, scouring the meridians in his body over and over again. Especially the injured areas, they became the focus of attention. In less than a day and a night, the sword wound in his body had already healed up. With a few coughs, he coughed out a few thick black blood clots. The heaviness in his chest had also lessened by a lot. The sword wound on his thigh looked very serious. After all, it was almost transparent. However, under the continuous nourishment of the spiritual energy, he could no longer feel the pain. Only the waves of numbness and itchiness throughout his body made June Moxie feel somewhat uncomfortable. However, it was also somewhat comfortable. As the saying goes, pain and happiness. Not only that, because of this injury, the Hungjun Pagoda continued to pour out spiritual energy. It seemed as if it would not stop until the scabs on June Moxie's body fell off. Of course, June Moxie would not let go of such a good opportunity to cultivate. He straightforwardly activated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune and guided the spiritual energy through his meridians. As soon as he activated the art, he immediately discovered something different. The spiritual energy seemed to condense and collide in his meridians. After the blockage caused by the sword wound a few times, it suddenly cleared up. At a speed that was almost visible to the naked eye, he could feel the airflow in his meridians expanding and becoming thicker bit by bit. If it was in the past, the Hungjun Pagoda would have stopped the output of spiritual energy a long time ago. However, this time, it did not have any intention of stopping. June Moxie was naturally happy. He simply gave up on the treatment of the sword wound and focused on guiding the spiritual energy to strengthen the airflow in his meridians. June Moxie suddenly felt that his behavior was similar to a scam. The other party was helping him to treat his injury out of goodwill, but he was using this opportunity to improve himself. It was like an unscrupulous businessman using the kindness of people to make huge profits. However, I'd rather do this kind of scam a few more times. I've already become addicted to scamming people. It would be a waste not to scam people. June Moxie shouted in his heart. He grasped the speed of the scam even more tightly. Otherwise, what would he do if the spiritual energy fell back to its original state after his injury was healed? He was already used to such a high quality of spiritual energy. If he were to fall back to his original state, all he could do was cry. But in one day and one night, the video was played 300 or 400 times. Isn't this too exaggerated? You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.